Can a simple radio broadcast bring down one of Formula One's most legendary teams? Today we reveal how Hamilton's words are putting Ferrari on the ropes just before one of the most critical Grand Prix of the year. When Hamilton dropped this "Qatar will be difficult" bombshell, he didn't do it randomly. It was not a hot emotional comment or a generic criticism of the team's performance. It was a technical and precise statement. Because if there is a place on the Formula One calendar where the weaknesses of the Ferrari SF-25 can be exposed with brutal clarity, it is at the Losail International Circuit. Qatar is not just any circuit. Its route is long, fast, and very demanding from an aerodynamic point of view. High-speed corners dominate the course, with a continuous sequence of turns that test the car's stability and the driver's confidence. There is no room for balance errors here, much less for cars that suffer at the rear like the current Ferrari. One of the main weaknesses of the SF-25 is precisely its inconsistency in high-speed corners. Since the pre-season, telemetry data and track analysis have confirmed that this car has difficulty maintaining aerodynamic load in the fastest sections, generating instability in the rear axle and loss of traction when exiting corners. On more technical tracks or with slow corners, this lack can be compensated for with suspension adjustments or tire strategy. But in Losail that is not possible. Here the car has to be naturally stable above 200 km/h, and Ferrari is not. This problem is compounded when considering Qatar's physical and climatic environment. We're talking about a night race in the desert, where the asphalt temperature can remain high even after sunset. This places enormous thermal demands on the tires, which must perform at their maximum without overheating. And if the SF-25 has demonstrated anything so far this season, it is its limited ability to manage the thermal window of the compounds. Ferrari has suffered graining, blistering, and excessive degradation at multiple circuits. In Qatar, that can turn into a real disaster. But not everything comes down to tires or aerodynamics. There is an even more subtle element that puts Ferrari at a disadvantage on this circuit: visibility and traffic management in low light conditions. In the past, teams with communication and reactivity problems have made costly mistakes in Qatar, and Ferrari already demonstrated in Las Vegas that its coordination between driver and engineers is far from the necessary level. The pit lane lights case, where Hamilton got confused with the signals, was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom. In a race like Losail, where traffic and timing are critical, any communication failure can cost seconds, and in Formula One, that is an eternity. To all this we must add the internal pressure. The team arrives fractured, with Hamilton in open conflict with the technical direction, and with Leclerc as the only card that has given results recently. This generates an explosive scenario where every decision will be questioned, every mistake amplified, and every gesture interpreted as a betrayal. In an environment like Qatar, where strategy must be executed with surgical precision, internal tensions can be the greatest enemy. As if that were not enough, the rivals are not static. McLaren arrives as the clear reference in performance on high-speed circuits. Red Bull, although in a structural crisis, still has the ability to take fast laps with Verstappen. And Mercedes has shown important advances in medium and high-load circuits. Ferrari, on the other hand, seems to be heading towards Qatar not with a plan, but with a set of doubts. And that is where the seriousness of the matter lies. Because Qatar is not just a technical challenge. It's a mirror. One that will show Ferrari, without filters or excuses, everything that is wrong. And if the team does not achieve a strong response, this race could mark a before and after in their season. Not because of the result itself, but because of what it can trigger internally if performance fails miserably again. When Hamilton's audio was leaked into the public domain, the paddock froze. What until then was a latent murmur, a suspicion buried between lines of diplomatic statements and fake smiles, became a burst of headlines. The consequences were not long in coming. First came the media impact, but the most important thing happened behind closed doors, where the real nerves are tense. Inside Ferrari. According to information leaked from Maranello's own circle, the Ferrari leadership called a series of extraordinary meetings after the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Not to deny the leak because what was said, but to try to contain the damage. The management team found itself at a crossroads: respond with a gesture of internal authority that sent a message of control, or publicly accept the crisis and appear vulnerable. The decision was the most Italian possible: silence. A strategic, deliberate silence that sought to cool the storm. But that silence was also interpreted by many as tacit confirmation that Hamilton had told the truth. At the same time, speculation was activated. Some media close to the paddock began to report that the engineering team was working under pressure with alternative configurations of the SF-25 for Qatar. 3 different possible setups, each trying to correct different aspects. One focused on stability in fast corners, another on tire thermal management, and a third, more experimental, focused on weight distribution to improve traction when exiting corners. But this multi-pronged strategy revealed more insecurity than innovation. Ferrari is not clear what its true solution is. They are trying blindly. And in Formula One, there is no room for improvisation when you face rivals with clear data and mature developments. This technical confusion is combined with an equally fragile internal political situation. Within the team, a silent division begins to brew. On the one hand, the engineers who believe in the methodical approach that has kept Leclerc competitive. On the other hand, those who support Hamilton's criticism and consider that the team needs a radical break in its way of operating. This rift threatens to fracture the unity that Ferrari so desperately needs to face a calendar that still has sharp curves ahead, both literally and metaphorically. And there is a more dangerous factor that no team can afford: mistrust. When a driver begins to doubt that the team is giving him the best possible car, and when the team begins to fear that the driver is playing more with the media narrative than with the stopwatch, a fundamental alliance is broken. Hamilton is not just any driver. He has a voice, influence, and the respect of the paddock. If he begins to suggest that there are questionable internal decisions, the sponsors, the analysts, the engineers, and even the mechanics themselves begin to look at each other looking for culprits. The consequences after Qatar could be profound. If performance falters again, and if Hamilton is once again exposed to faster rivals, the situation could escalate beyond the sporting. There is already talk in circles close to the Scuderia of the possibility of technical restructuring, leadership changes in the strategy area, and even a review of the development program for the 2026 car. Because if Qatar confirms Hamilton's warnings, Ferrari will have to admit that it has lost not a race, but control of its narrative. And that, in a season where McLaren consolidates its leadership, Mercedes shows signs of resurrection and Red Bull rearms itself, is the worst possible scenario for a team that has been searching for too many years for a renaissance that never ends up coming. The Qatar Grand Prix will not be just another race on the calendar. It won't be one of those events that gets filed away as just another statistic. It will potentially be a turning point for Ferrari. Because depending on what happens in Losail, this season can take one of 2 diametrically opposite paths: reconstruction or definitive fracture. If Ferrari fails again, if the SF-25 exposes the same weaknesses it has shown at previous circuits, if Hamilton once again finds himself fighting the car more than his rivals, then the team will have lost more than a race. He will have lost authority. It will have lost legitimacy. And perhaps most seriously, he will have lost the faith of one of the most influential pilots in history. In modern Formula One, performance is not measured in points alone. It is measured in trust, in synergy between driver and team, in strategic clarity. And today Ferrari is dangerously close to running out of those 3 things. The collapse would not come from a catastrophic failure in the car, but from an internal erosion that is not seen in the times, but is perceived in the erratic decisions, in the uncomfortable silences, and in the gestures of frustration that the cameras can no longer hide. However, there is another possibility. There is still a door ajar. If Ferrari achieves a result in Qatar that counters the current narrative, if Hamilton shows he can extract performance from the SF-25 on a track that forces you to be perfect every lap, and if the team shows real signs of understanding the problems and acting on them, then a turnaround could occur. A change of direction not only technically but also emotionally. Because Ferrari doesn't just need results. You need a sign. Tangible evidence that there is leadership, direction, and the ability to adapt. That kind of redemption isn't measured just by a podium or a fastest lap. It is measured with correct decisions under pressure, with strategies that recover positions, and with communication between pilot and engineers that once again sounds like a single body, not like 2 worlds separated by a radio frequency. But the margin is minimal. Qatar does not give second chances. It is a route that mercilessly punishes indecision, an environment that does not allow improvisations, and a race where the entire world will be watching every mistake, every adjustment, every tire choice. Because after Las Vegas, Ferrari is in the eye of the hurricane, and each turn will be analyzed as a sentence. The collapse or redemption will not depend only on the technical performance of the SF-25, but on how Ferrari manages this media and strategic storm that they themselves have allowed to grow. The question is no longer whether Ferrari can win races. The question is whether Ferrari can sustain its identity, its unity, and its credibility in the face of the toughest challenge it has faced in the hybrid era. That of not disappointing either its history or its future. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.